Well, good morning again to everyone, and hopefully you're a little bit more energetic and awake. I know that some of you have just come in not too long ago, and you probably are just trying to catch up after watching the Cubs last night make way to well, there was another game on, I guess. I heard something about a Penn State game or something, and so good for Penn State. I know a couple of people are Ohio State fans, and it's really good for me that Ohio State lost. I was thrilled with that. Anyhow. But we are in the middle of our, your pictures disappeared of the presentation.
Like I don't have your background images.
So just throw something up there, surprise me. Because I don't see it anyhow, so it doesn't really matter to me. Technology is great when it works. And now what we have is, we have a back screen. You guys can turn around and look at it. You can see it's called a cheat screen. And they put a message up for me and they flash it green. And most of the time I just ignore it because, quite honestly, they put up messages that aren't worthwhile and just to annoy me. But we're talking about our enemies today. Not that they're my enemies. And you have to be careful what you say about the media people because they do control the microphone as well. And are we good? We're good. I guess we're good. We're good? Okay. I get the just move on kind of thing. We're going to begin this morning by reading together a text that's familiar to many of us. We are in our fourth week of a series that's going to take us probably for another 4 weeks or so. It's a text that's Romans chapter 8, verse 28. Some of us know that by heart, but I'm going to invite you to read this with me this morning, if you would. I'm going to make sure. There you go, girl. See, I knew I could count on Rachel. I tell you what, they do such a great job back there, and the only time we ever notice it is when there's a mistake. But why don't we say thank you to them for all that they do? They provide the audio and the visual and things, and they have to deal with the praise team periodically as well, and all of that. There's a lot of personalities that they have to deal with, and they do it very well, and we certainly thank God for them. We're going to read together this text because it might fit in with all the technical difficulties that we're having here this morning. It says this, let's read together. And we know that God causes everything. You guys read with me, okay?
Jeremiah. Not up there.
That's Jeremiah.
Oh my gosh, what is Jeremiah? Hold on.
There we go. I love Rachel. Okay, is it behind me now?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to start over again. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you here with us today. And we're just excited that you decided to worship with us. We're in the fourth week of our series, and we're moving on now. And so when they cut and edit the video, they won't show all that other stuff that already just took place, right? But Romans 8:28. And this text fits, doesn't it? Everything's going on right now. Let's read it together. And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose for them. I want you to think about this text for a moment. And before you respond, I really want you to think about the question that I'm about to ask you. Do you love God? Do you love God? Do you love God enough that you believe that everything, that would be all things, work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose for them? Because let's be honest, when we use that and we realize it says He works everything together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose, that everything means both good and bad, doesn't it? Joys and heartaches. That's a struggle for us. We like it when life is good. We like it when we can kick back in the lazy boy recliner of life and just enjoy. But what about those times when it's not so comfortable? It's tough. It's tough, especially when we go and we look at Jeremiah 29:7. We're not going to see that text. Well, we did see that text. We're not going to see that text anymore today. But that text, what it tells us, because we spent so much time last week in it. In fact, if you weren't here last week, this is part 2 of last week. And hopefully you'll glean something from this. But you can go to our website, hanoverdale.church, and you can look at that sermon plus the others in this series. But our lesson from Jeremiah 29:7 really is a challenge for each of us to not just pray for our enemies, and let's be honest, we do that. Lord, I pray judgment upon them, right? I mean, just make life miserable. That's not what it's saying. We're not only called to pray for our enemies, but we are called to pray for blessings to come upon our enemies. And that changes the dynamics greatly, doesn't it? We are called to pray for blessings upon our enemies. And that is so hard. But it's only hard if we don't grasp what Romans 8:28 says. You see, if we take the perspective and we actually believe what Romans 8:28 says, to the point not only where it's here, but it's here in our actions, and we actually live this out, then it could easily be said, and I want you to hear this morning, because this may just rattle your cages, and that's okay. It could easily be said that if we believe what Romans 8:28 says, that enemies then are not really our enemies, but enemies are actually some of the best friends that we have. That's a tough one, isn't it? Let me say it again. Enemies aren't really our enemies, but if we believe Romans 8:28, they're actually some of the best friends that we have. You say, why? How is that possible? It's possible because it's how God helps bring the work of grace into my life. You are here today either because you've made a decision to make Jesus Christ Lord of your life, or you're here wondering what this thing about Jesus is all about. But no matter why you are here, the reason ultimately is because God is a God of grace. And God is a God of mercy. And He wants to extend that grace in your life. But He also wants you to exhibit that grace in the lives of others. And there are only lessons that we can learn that come through suffering and through pain and through hardship, through difficulty. And God uses those perceived enemies. Again, those perceived enemies, God uses those to expose things into our lives that we would never see, or things that we would less understand if they were removed from our life. And so we have to experience some of these heartaches, some of these difficulties. And so another way that we can express it is this, is that what some call an enemy is really not just my best friend, not really just a helper, but they are an agent from God for my good. That's a hard one for us to grasp, isn't it? Because when's the last time you looked at someone that you perceive to be an enemy and says, thank God for them. They are just brought to me really from God for my good. I don't think so. Our humanness says, forget that. Let me show my enemies what I think about them. Rather than saying, you know what? I want to show my enemies what God thinks about them. And I want God to use me to be the vessel by which they're shown. Wow. So it's not simply enough to say that we believe that God has a purpose for everything that happens to us. What we need to understand is that God always has a beneficial purpose for the things that take place in our life. And there's a difference, whether we like it or not. Absolutely, brother. And so with that in mind, we turn to really the very practical questions of how do we respond to those who hurt us deeply. Because I would dare say that every single one of us on some level have been hurt by someone else. Every one of us. And I know how deep that hurt is. And some of us may look at someone else and say, really, you're letting that bother you? Because we're not in the midst of their circumstance. All of us have been hurt on some level. Jesus comes and He tells us to love our enemies. Easy to do? No. It's not easy to do. When you look at the situation that took place in Jeremiah 29, where we've been parking the last number of weeks, we find again that the Jews, the people of God, had been taken forcibly out of their homeland and deposited in Babylon. Why? Because they had disobeyed God. Let's never forget that. They had been disobedient to God, and so God allows the wicked Babylonians to come in to destroy the temple, to destroy the city, to take many of their leaders captive or to kill them, deposit them there in Babylon, and then the hammer comes down and God says, not only did this happen, but you're going to be there for 70 years, which means that many of them, those who were older, would never return home. They would never go back to their homeland again. You talk about difficult. And so what they find themselves faced with a couple of questions. Questions, first of all, is how in the world am I supposed to love someone who has ruined everything that I hold dear? The next question that may come from them, because we understand it, is why would I seek their prosperity after everything they've done to me? Because if we're honest, in the flesh, we don't want our enemies to prosper, do we? We want them to suffer more than we suffer. And so how do we pray those prayers? How do we apply that to our lives? And it goes back to the question that we asked the first week of this series, which really was I think, something that set us on this journey. And the question is this: what do you do when you don't like the circumstances of your life and you don't see them changing anytime soon? We've all been there. And God in His grace has shown us again in His Word, that the infallible, inerrant Word of God, He brings that to the forefront and He says, here is how I want you to respond. And we've been kind of dissecting that over the weeks that have since come. You know, the first thing He says to him is this, is you are where you are because that's where I put you. The sovereignty of God. God's in control. He's above all things. He's in all things. And so not only are you there where I put you, but I want you to settle down and I want you to make the best of your situation. Hard to do. Hard to grab a hold of. But then last week we talked about the next step, and that is to seek, not just to pray for the people who have hurt us, but to seek blessings for them. Pray for your enemies and seek them to be blessed. Wow. And then we're hit hard with that command of Jesus Himself, who we say that as Christians. And what Christian means is little Christ. We are supposed to be a reflection of Christ. And Jesus says very clearly, love your enemies. Which I guess that means that we as Christians are supposed to love our enemies. We're smacked with that. And so how do we grasp this command? More importantly, how do we apply this command? Well, I would say this, that grasping this command and applying this command really is the only thing that will ever set us on the journey that we need to go on. That will take us from bitterness to forgiveness, from forgiveness to freedom. Some of us are still wallowing in bitterness and we still aren't yet to the place of forgiveness. But I will tell you, once you get to the place of forgiveness, then you will experience incredible freedom. Another way to say it would be is that we cannot be set free until we set our enemies free to be blessed by God. And so that leads us to the next question as we try to decipher all of this. It builds on what we talked about last week. And if you missed last week, again, you can go to hannahriddell.church. But last week we asked two questions. First of all, who are my enemies? Who are my enemies? And my hope is that you've gone through and you've looked at that this past week and you've allowed the Holy Spirit to reveal to you those individuals that you perceive to be enemies in your life. The second question we ask is, where do my enemies come from? Our next question today is probably the most difficult question that we have to deal with when we're looking at this, and it's this one. How am I to love my enemies? You ever wondered that? How do I love my enemies? So last week I mentioned that we would cover 7 suggestions. How's that? Just suggestions, recommendations on things that we can apply to our lives. And I'm not going to go, there's not going to be a test on this. And I'm not going to hammer you and make sure that you guys are doing this. I'll let the Holy Spirit deal with you in that area. But these are 7 suggestions that will hopefully help us move in the right direction. To seek to become what God has called us to be. To do what He's called us to do. And that is to love our enemies. And so the first one, again, I think a lot of these are simple. But the first one is simply greet them. Greet them. Say that. Greet them. And it's simple, isn't it? And yet we make it so difficult. What do I mean by that? Some of us are experts. Whenever we've got someone that we perceive to be an enemy in our life, we do everything we can to avoid them, do we not? Some of us are experts at kind of jumping into the next crevice, or perhaps developing a cough at the most opportune time as you're walking by the so you don't have to look at it. You can keep on going. You know, one of the greatest inventions, I should say, one of the greatest inventions that I think that in this area is called caller ID. You know? Because you don't have to answer your phone. You can simply see who comes up on your phone. And you can decide whether or not you're going to actually talk to that person or not. And most of the time, if they are a perceived enemy, you know what you do? I'm not talking to them. They can leave a message and I will listen to it if I want to. Right? That's our attitude. And yet, how are we going to ever begin the dialogue that needs to take place? The healing process that needs to take place, that takes us from bitterness to forgiveness to freedom. How are we going to ever begin that if we're not even willing to greet them? Step number 2. Not only are we called to greet them, we are called to disarm them. Disarm them. Now that doesn't imply that they're carrying a weapon, okay? So what does disarm them actually mean? You disarm someone by doing the thing that they least expect you to do. You know what they least expect you to do? The thing they least expect you to do is speak well of them. And so what we need to do is be willing to speak well of them when no one else expects it. General Robert E. Lee. I don't think anybody was alive when he was here on earth, but you've heard of him perhaps. He was once asked his opinion of a fellow officer who was widely known as one of Lee's greatest detractors. He despised General Lee and made sure everyone that he spoke to knew all about it. And so General Lee was asked his opinion of this fellow officer. And the general responded this way. He says, "I think he is a very fine officer." Now the person who's asking the question thinks that General Lee probably didn't hear it, right? And he says, "Sir, I'm not sure you heard the question. Or perhaps I guess you don't know what he's been saying about you." He said, "Oh yes, I do. But I was asked my opinion of him, not his opinion of me." Let's be honest. Our tendency, if we were in Lee's shoes, would be to unleash. To say all kinds of things that might come to mind, whether it's true or not. No, we need to greet them. We need to disarm them. And then the third step, or suggestion, let's put it that way, is we need to do good to them. Do good to them. What does that mean? What does it mean to do good to our enemies? It means seeing beyond your pain, seeing beyond your suffering, seeing beyond their meanness, and instead looking at their humanity. It means we have to be willing to see people as being made in the image of God. And there's something that's within them that is allowing them to be all twisted up to do what they do. And so doing good to them means that you are promoting healing, despite the way that they've treated you, to help them to see themselves as, first of all, someone who's made in the image of God, but then to live as someone who's made in the image of God. I didn't say these suggestions were easy. This is difficult, isn't it? And yet that's what we've been called to do. You have to be willing to make the contact. You have to be willing to make that first move. Pick up the phone, send an email, send a text, Twitter, whatever it is you want to do. You bridge the gap and do good to them. Maybe you let them know that you are praying blessings for them today. You think that would rattle their cage a little bit? Absolutely. I met a man a while back who had an uncanny knack for being able to display this kind of attitude. He had a lot of people who didn't like him. The position he was in led to itself to that. And so I asked him, I said, "What is your secret? How do you actually do good to people who have hurt you?" He said, "There's 4 things. Number 1, show up. Be there. Don't avoid them. Show up." Then he said, "Hang loose." You can tell what generation he's from, right? Hang loose. Chill. Relax. What does that mean? Let's be honest, when we're faced oftentimes with someone we perceive to be an enemy, we get uptight, don't we? He's saying, just relax. But the only way you can relax, he said, is if you know that God's God. and God's in control. That leads to the third step, he said, which was trust God. So show up, hang loose, trust God, and then he said stay alert. Stay alert for what? For opportunities. For opportunities to be able to bless those who hurt you. Number 4. The fourth suggestion is refuse to speak evil of them. Refuse to speak evil of them. Again, if we think about the relationships and the conflict that we've had, our tendency, our human nature is to go right to try to nail them, isn't it? Not just to their face, but to everyone else around them. That doesn't happen in church, though, does it? Yeah, it does. But it shouldn't. Not if we're reflecting Christ. And so we need to refuse to speak evil of those individuals. I think that's what Jesus meant when he said in Luke chapter 6, verse 28. He says, bless those who curse you. Pray for those who hurt you. It means you choose not to think evil thoughts of those individuals, and you refuse to speak evil against those individuals who have wronged you. I think you'll agree that the tongue can be a powerful weapon. Proverbs talks about it quite a bit, about the power of our words. In fact, Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21 says it this way. It says, the tongue can bring death or life. And then I love this next part. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. You see, how in the world does it relate to this issue of refusing to speak evil to individuals? Or this issue of forgiveness? Well, I would say this, is that forgiveness in many cases is not possible because we won't stop talking. We continue to talk and speak evil about those individuals. Over and over and over and over and over again. We talk about how much they've hurt us. We talk about the pain they've brought us. We talk about the suffering we've had to endure. And that allows us to continue to fester in us. And as long as we continue to talk, we will never find the strength to forgive. And so at some point we have to stop talking and we need to start forgiving. You can criticize the Babylonians. If the people of Judah, we can go and criticize the Babylonians all we want for how they treated us. Or you can choose to pray blessings for the Babylonians. But one thing I can tell you for sure is this. You can't do both at the same time. We can sit here and criticize our perceived enemies and we can continue to bash them. Or we can pray blessings on them, but we can't do them both at the same time. So we've got to decide what is it we're going to do. Are we going to love our enemies and pray blessings for them as we've been commanded to do? Or are we going to continue to wallow in the self-pity and the suffering and the heartache that we've had to endure? Well, at some point we've got to stop talking. And sometimes we've got to start forgiving. Number 5. Number 5 is we need to thank God for them. Okay, Kevin, you had me up to here, right? Yeah. I mean, those things I could possibly do, but to thank God for my enemies? But if you believe in the sovereignty of God, and what does it mean, the sovereignty of God? It means that all things are under God's rule and God's control, and nothing happens without His direction or His permission. All things happen under God's rule and under God's control, and nothing happens without His direction or permission. If you believe that, if you believe in the sovereignty of God, then you must believe that your enemy is actually sent here by God's design and with God's approval. Your enemy could not torment you apart from God's permission. That makes sense here, right? It's a whole other thing when it's here, in the actions that we live. Not only could our enemies not torment us without God's permission, but, and let me say that's a big, huge but, God would never permit them to torment us if He did not intend to bring something good out of it. Why? Because what Romans 8:28 says. All things, everything works together for good for those that love God and are called according to His purpose. You see how it ties together? Don't you hate it when Scripture kicks you in the rear end? You see, in many ways, it's almost as if we should take a picture of our enemy, frame it, stick it on the refrigerator door. And every time you go to the refrigerator, you thank God for that person. I didn't say put it on a dartboard. I said put it on the refrigerator and thank God for that person. Tough, right? Some of you are sitting there thinking, oh boy, whose picture do I have on the refrigerator that I need to make sure they don't see when they come over because they'll think they're an enemy. That's not what we're talking about. But have you thanked God for your enemy? Moving on. The sixth way to love our enemies is to pray for them. Pray for them. Not judgment upon them, pray for them. You see, Kevin, what if I hate that person? I mean, what if I hate them? Okay. Tell God. One thing I can tell you, He won't be surprised to hear it. Right? God already knows you hate that person. So be transparent enough to say, God, you already know this, but I just got to tell you, I hate this person, and I know I'm supposed to love this person, but I got to tell you, I'm struggling with that because in my own strength and in my humanness, there's absolutely no way that I can do that. And so here's what I need, God. I need you to come in, and I need you to fill me with your love. I need you to help me love this person as you love them. I need you to fill me with your love to make that happen. Because I can't do it on my own. And here's one thing I know for certain is that God will not turn you away. God will not turn you away. When you come to Him with an honest heart, with a transparent heart, and you admit that you need His love to flow from Him through you. That's what He wants to be able to do. But not only pray for them, number 7, as we talked about last week, we also need to ask God to bless them. How do we do that? This past week I was thinking about the answer to that question. And then I was over helping some individuals out, painting their home for them, and they're getting ready to move and they aren't able to do it. And so Susan and I were over there doing a bunch of painting. And we got to talking about this subject. And they said almost verbatim what I said, what I felt God was telling me, of how we ask God to bless them. And the answer to that question, as someone who's mistreated you, is that you ask God to do to them what you would have God do to you. If you want God to bless you, then you need to pray for those same blessings to fall upon the person who you perceive to be your enemy. That's tough. You seek the blessing for them that you want God to do for you. You see, the greater the hurt, the greater potential for blessing that will come. When we forgive from the heart and by God's grace bless those who curse us, it's transforming for us. But let me try to put this in a broader perspective. Suppose you find yourself in your self-proclaimed Babylon right now. You feel forgotten. You feel overlooked. You feel oppressed. You feel misused. You feel taken for granted. You don't like where you're at right now, and you don't like the people you're around. Now, don't look at the person next to you when I say that, okay? But if that's you, join the crowd. Because I will tell you that if you don't feel that way now, there's going to become a time in life when you will. Perhaps you've been wallowing in that for quite some time. So the question is this, and I want you to hear this question. If you find yourself in Babylon right now, and you're struggling with that, you're struggling because you don't like the people you're with, you feel like you're just being dumped on. The question is this, how is God going to reach Babylon? One thing I know for certain is this, is that His method has been the same throughout history. God reaches the lost, as we call them, those who are outside of a relationship with Jesus Christ, by sending His people to those who are lost. That's what He does. You say, Kevin, what if I don't want to go? That's funny. Why don't you ask Jonah how that worked out? You see, Jonah decided he wasn't going to do what God wanted him to do. He's going to run the other way. To the very end of what was the known culture, the known earth at that point. And God said, Jonah and the big fish, perhaps you've heard of it. Putting them in the hands of the people that they hated, he's doing the same thing to the people of God. You say, well, I thought they were there because they were being punished. That's true. But God said, in the midst of your punishment, I want you to understand you're also called to be my missionaries. I intend you to be a blessing to my captives, to the captives, and those who hold you captive. I'm going to tell you, when I look at it from that angle, I find it to be encouraging and uplifting. Because it means when I've really messed up, when I feel like I'm suffering badly from my mistakes, that God can still use me. As I shared that in the first service, I was reminded once again, and you've heard, many of you have heard this story before, but just bear with me. But I was reminded of my oldest daughter. Kaylee was pregnant out of wedlock. And I know in our culture today that doesn't seem like a big deal. But Kaylee and I and our family believe that Scripture says that that's wrong. And I'll never forget the phone call that I got from her. I took it down in our living room and called Susan in. We went upstairs and laid on the bed as we talked to her, and I literally was shaking inside. Kind of a whirlwind of what was going to happen. One of the questions Kaylee asked me, he said, Daddy, what will the church do? I said, quite honestly, I don't give a rip. If they won't have me, shame on them. Then she asked a tough question. Daddy, do you love me? You betcha. Daddy, can I come home? Absolutely, I can't wait to give you a hug. It was a tough time. A really tough time. We had an opportunity to sit, and I remember talking with Kaylee as we were sitting in our car, going somewhere to do something, who knows what. And we were talking about that. She knew that God had forgiven her, and she'd asked forgiveness from others. And I'll never forget her take on the whole thing. She understood that in spite of the fact that, there's some things when we sin, people don't really know about it. Let me just say, pregnancy is one of those things that you can't hide, okay? And we talked about that. And yet she understood that God could even use that for His glory. Today, my shy Kaylee, and she's shy, is being used by God to talk to other girls who are going through the same issue. Today, God is using my shy Kaylee to lead people into a relationship with Jesus Christ. Today, God is using my shy Kaylee and her husband to impact His kingdom by having Bible study in their home. In many ways, I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone, and yet the result of that is not only do I see a daughter and a son-in-law who have grown dramatically in the relationship with Jesus Christ, but I also have a grandson. God works all things together for good. Those that trust Him. Who are called according to His purpose. There are people who, early on, talked about Kaylee behind her back. Talked about us behind our back. And yet Kaylee And we too have strived to love them anyhow. Is it easy? Nope. But God is good. And God has now allowed, in spite of the heartache, in spite of the suffering, for missionaries to be planted, to impact lives, to build the kingdom of Christ. Whatever your perceived enemy or whoever it may be, my question is, do you want to share Christ with them? Are you willing to share Christ with them? And if you are, then you need to be willing to take these steps. You see, your enemy is a gift from God to you. My enemy, perceived enemies, are gifts of God to me. And I know that sounds just crazy. It's not crazy talk. But the person who has hurt you so deeply is a gift from God to you. Doesn't excuse evil, doesn't condone mistreatment. But it's exactly what Joseph meant when he said to his brothers in Genesis 50:20. He said, you intended to harm me. But God intended it all for good. It all. Meaning being thrown into the cistern and then pulled out, being sold into slavery, and then being thrown into jail because he refused the advances of Potiphar's wife, and all of the things that happened to him. All of that, he says, was intended for good. God brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. You see, our enemies humble us. Our enemies show us our weakness. They expose our total need for God. Just as David needed King Saul to pursue him and to persecute him and repeatedly attempt to kill him, we too need our enemies that God sends to us. And if we didn't need them, then God wouldn't send them. And so therefore, we need to ask and thank God who knows best, and we need to love our enemies the best way we can. Because God often raises up an enemy to see if I really want to be, and I believe this, God raises up enemies in my life to see if I really want to be like Him. So my question to you is this, and I don't want you to throw it out, this answer, because you're in church. In fact, just keep your answer to yourself and God. But the question is this, do you want to be like Jesus? Ask yourself, do I want to be like Jesus? Jesus didn't get even with his enemies. He said he blessed them. He blessed them. And if you and I can let go of our anger long enough to pray and to be like Christ, then we'll discover incredible benefit. Because when we pray for God's blessings to fall upon our enemies, we too will be in a position to receive those blessings ourselves. And so here's the challenge for us today. On the screen behind me is a rewrite of Jeremiah 29:7. And what I want you to do is I want you just to read that quietly here this morning. And as you've read that, if you're willing to proclaim that, I want you to read it with me as we close. But here's the deal. I don't want you to do it just because everybody else is doing it. People around you aren't going to really care whether you've read it or not. If you're not at a point where you can read it right now, then our prayer is that someplace, sometime you will get to that point. We'd love to walk with you on that journey. But are you willing to read that now? And if so, will you read it with me as we close today? Let's read it together. I will work for the peace and prosperity of the enemies God has allowed to come into my life. I will pray to the Lord for them, for their welfare will determine my welfare. Let's pray.